Good morning, lovelies. Eyes on Jesus. Let's talk about it. Jesus. Lots of Jesus. Coffee. So, let's focus on focus. Right? Let's focus on focus. Let's focus on keeping our focus on Jesus. And I want to go into a story out of Matthew 14. I'm going to read through most of the passage, starting in verse 22. This is when Jesus walks on water and brings a playmate out to walk on water with him. And we're moreover going to focus on Peter in this instance. But I want to go into the passage and I want to talk about why we keep our eyes on Jesus, why we keep our focus on Jesus, and why we don't let things distract us. So immediately he made the disciples, and so the context of this passage, he is following the feeding of the 5,000, which was actually feeding of a lot more, because the 5,000 that were counted were just men. So this is after he performed his miracle with the 5 and 2. So 5 loaves and 2 fish. So immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, across the Sea of Galilee, while he sent the crowds away. So he was sending them all away and told his disciples, go. Now I want you to see what happens in here, because there's a few things that happen in this passage. After he sent the crowds away, he went up to the mountains by himself to pray. So father-son time. And when it was evening, he was there alone. So now he sent them across. Now it is late in the evening. And you're going to see what's happening to the disciples here. The boat was already a long distance from land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So now the boat's getting beat up by the waves. A little bit of a storm going on. And he's got them out there in that storm, grinding through that storm. In the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. So this is late in the night, 4th watch. This is probably over the course of the night, late night. Here he comes walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," as they cried out in fear, because they're getting beaten and battered by the waves and the winds. And they're not happy about this. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come out onto the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came toward Jesus. Right? "Lord, if it's you, command me to come." Jesus says, "Come on. Let's go. Come on." Here's where everything goes south. And here's where the true lesson is learned, is right here. So, ears open. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. What? Oh, Jesus doing a whole lot of teaching. You're in the hard. You're in the hard by yourself. When I come along, the wind stops. The wind and the waves stop. When you keep your eyes on me, you can do amazing things. Get Peter kept his eyes on Jesus and walked on water. So what are the lessons we take away from this? Well, other than let's keep our eyes focused on Jesus. Because much like Peter, when we take our eyes off and we start to look around, we sink. And it's true, guys. It's true in all of our lives. It's true in mine. I catch myself taking my eyes off of him. Nothing good comes about of it. When we keep our eyes and when we keep our faith and focus on Jesus during our challenges, we recognize the power of the obedience to Christ. There's power in obedience to him. There's power in his commands. What was the power in his commands? He told Peter, come. And Peter walked on water. I mean, Jesus walking on water alone is crazy. But he commands Peter, who's not the Son of God, come. And he walks on water. Why? Because of the power of his faith. And what happens? The wind and the waves, and Peter gets distracted and Peter gets scared. And when fear sets in, that's when doubt takes hold. And when fear comes in and doubt starts to take hold, what happened? Peter sank. Fear restricts us, right? Fear. False evidence appearing real. And what the enemy wants you to think of the letters in the word fear is forget everything and run. That's what he wants. It's not what it is. We stay focused and we keep our eyes locked on the prize. We keep our eyes locked on Jesus. We don't take our eyes off of him. That's what the world wants. So when we're in the hard, when we're in the midst of the hard, like the disciples were, right? Wind and waves, probably like finding it hard to row. Here comes Jesus. Walking on water. And in the midst of that hard and in the midst of those trials comes peace. Why? Because we trust him. We trust him. Go, all right, Lord, you got this. It's your battle. It's not mine. It's your fight. It's not mine. Guys, trust me. I've got a major uphill battle ahead of me, and I got a major uphill battle this week. I have a mammoth task ahead of me. But I'm not going to focus on the task. I'm going to focus on the Savior. I'm going to focus on the one who's going to get me through the task. Why? Because he's faithful. Because he's good. Because he promises that he'll lead us through it. No temptation's overtaken us except which is common to man. Grumbling, doubt, fear, all of that's temptation from the enemy, causing us to turn our eyes away, causing us to turn our eyes off of the situation. Faith is an active process, guys. It's an active process. It's not a passive process. Faith is active, and it requires our willingness to step out of our comfort zone, because that's where faith takes place. Did Peter use his faith standing in the boat? No. His faith, he exercised his faith, actively exercised his faith by stepping out on the water, by calling Jesus and saying, Lord, if it's really you, command me. You triggered his faith right there. It's an active process, guys. Step into the uncomfortable. Look at the Israelites as they stood facing the Red Sea with the enemy on their heels. What did Moses do? Stretched out his arms, stretched out the staff. A sea became a highway. Faith. What happened as they were leading the Ark of the Covenant? Joshua is leading the Ark of the Covenant across the Jordan. Required the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant to step into the Jordan. What did God do? Heaped up the rivers. Made a river into a highway. Again, parted that water. Didn't do it and then say, okay, go ahead and walk through. Took faith. Keeping their eyes on God. And going, okay, here we go, Lord. Stepping in, and he heaps the water up so that they can walk through it on dry land with the Ark of the Covenant. What's God telling us? Step into the hard and be willing to step into the hard. Be willing to step into that uncomfortable so that my power can be perfected. 2 Corinthians 12:9, right? He tells Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in your weakness. And I love Paul's response. I'd rather gladly boast of my weaknesses to know that the power of Christ rests upon me. Keep your eyes on him. Step into the uncomfortable and be okay with it. Why? Because that's where your faith grows. It's an active process. It grows. That's called sanctification. That's where you see God's power and work, and you're like, just when I think I can't love you anymore, Lord, you go and do something else. And I know he's going to do something this week. I got a tough challenge ahead of me this week, but you know what? I'm all in. I'm all in. There's going to be a lot of prayer going on this morning, but I'm all in. So, I love you guys. He loves you like crazy. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever Dad wants to talk about. Love you guys.